This is a story about a boy who loved stories. His name was Henry. Henry's favorite stories were true ones. He loved hearing other people talk about their adventures and their experiences, and Henry himself was starting to have adventures of his own. One night, while laying in bed thinking, Henry was wearing his favorite pajamas. His untidy, wiry black hair nestled in his pillow. His bright green eyes looked down at his knobby knees and feet poking up from underneath the blanket. Then, as he did every night, Henry stared at the ceiling and thought about his day. His adventures played like a movie in his mind. He thought about all the best parts. Usually the best parts included things like tadpoles, ice cream, and anything squishy and messy. As Henry lay there, he began to worry. What if I forget the stories, he thought? Or what if a giant story-eating Augosaurus were to come in the night and snatch them from my brain and eat them for a midnight snack? The stories would be gone forever. Oh, Henry lay there thinking about the problem until suddenly he had a splendid, wonderful idea. The kind of idea that tingles your stomach and swirls your mind back and forth, around and around. Oh, he could hardly sleep with all the excitement building up inside. But eventually, waves of slumber overcame him, and he slept. The very next morning, Henry went to the old shed in his backyard. It was full of tools, junk, gadgets, and endless possibilities. Finding some old pieces of wood, he began. Summertime, and I have something to do. I really need to make a thing or two. Oh yeah, I got me a pencil and sketched up a plan. Sketched out a picture and said, I can. Found all the tools I needed, then I began. Bam, 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 I will hammer it. Saw, 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 I can cut it. Buzz, 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 watch me drill it. Give me the chance and I will build it. Whoa, oh, 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 oh. Piece by piece, I'm putting it together. Make it well, and it will last forever. Oh yeah, to hold it tight, I'll use some glue. Let it dry, then sand it smooth. Just a little paint, and baby, I am through. I did it, bam, bam, bam. I will hammer it, saw, saw, saw. I can cut it, buzz, buzz, buzz. Watch me drill it, give me the chance, and I will build it. Bam, bam, bam. I will hammer it, saw, saw, saw. I can cut it, buzz, buzz, buzz. Watch me drill it, just give me the chance, and I will build it. Henry continued to work in the old shed. Saw, saw, saw. He took some glue off the shelf. Squirt, squirt, squirt. He picked up a hammer and some old nails. Bam, bam, bam. He opened a can of paint. Brush, brush, brush. He worked and worked in the old shed till early evening. The sound in the old shed finally stopped. Bang! The shed door flew open. Henry backed out, dragging something large through the door. He dragged it across the yard a few steps at a time. Swish, 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 swish. He pushed it into the house and pulled it up the stairs. Clump, 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 clump. He dragged it into his room, where it landed at the foot of his bed with a final thump. Oh, Henry stood back and admired his creation. It was a large wooden box with a lid held on by two creaky hinges. It had rope handles and the sides were a bit crooked. On the top edge hung a metal clasp with a lock. On the front of the box, in yellow paint, were the words, Henry's Story Box. He smiled and opened the lock with the small metal key. Click. He lifted the lid. Creak. The box was empty. But not for long, Henry said out loud. Henry lifted his hand to his head and thought about one of the stories. With his finger and thumb, he gently plucked out the story and put it in the box. Ding! Like the box was saying, "Thank you." He stared down at the story. It was about his first bike. Henry noticed that, like his bike, the story was bright red. He plucked out another one. Pluck! Oh, he noticed that this story pulsed with an orange glow. He smiled at the memory of catching his biggest fish. He put it in the box. Ding! He thought of another story, plucked it out, and put it in the box. Ding! And another story. Pluck, pluck, pluck! Ding, ding, ding! Pluck, ding! Purple stories, pink stories, multicolored stories. He wasn't sure how some of them got their color. He only knew somehow that each color was just perfect. He continued until he was sure all the stories in his head were also in the box. The bottom of his story box was now covered with a rainbow of memories. He locked the box, click, and hung the key with the string around his neck. He then went to bed, content and happy that his stories were finally safe. From then on, whenever Henry heard a good story, click would go the lock, creak would go the lid, and pluck would go the memory. Ding! When he or his family had an adventure, click would go the lock, creak would go the lid, and pluck would go the memory. Ding! Henry's story box began filling up. And as the pile of stories grew, so did Henry. First step, first grade, hide and seek and catching a frog. Climbing trees, suddenly teens, puppy love and playing guitar. Now, high school dances, breaking up and more romances. Stories of a life. Stories of a first car, first kiss, gotta fit in, be cool, skipping school, fishing down by the lake. Junior prom, and those teen years are gone. Moving out in lots and lots of mistakes. See the world and many places. Settle down and some little faces. Stories of a life. Memories come and moments go. Lessons learned as we grow. Others touch us, we all change. Our hearts will never be the same. Stories of life. Oh, now we worry as they scurry. Oh, hide and seek and catching a frog. Climbing trees, suddenly teens, puppy love and playing guitar. We watch them go to dances, dry their tears and more romances. Stories of a life. Memories come and moments go. Lessons learned as we grow. Others touch us, we all change. Our hearts will never be the same. Stories of life. Weeks turned into months, months into years, and over time Henry found that life was even better when it was shared with someone you love. And that love spilled out into a family of his own. His stories were now even bigger and better, but sometimes tender, simpler, and better. Henry's life, once full of noise and joy, got quieter over the years, until the house echoed with the footsteps of an old man whose black wiry hair had turned snowy white, with a long beard to match. A face with green eyes and wrinkles from a million smiles and days spent under a brilliant yellow sun. Just like Henry, the wooden box was also older, still at the foot of his bed, with its creaky hinges and old lock. The painted words, Henry's Story Box, were now faded and scratched, and the box was full, stuffed with stories of a well-lived life, a tapestry of colors woven together in an endless spiral of time. Stories of Henry and his family, some lost, some now living far away. He thought about those memories as he sat alone in his quiet and empty house. When did this house get so cold? Huh. No more laughter through the walls. When did the colors begin to fade? No more footsteps in the hall. When did my hands begin to shake? When did the road get so long? When did the hours turn into days and years? 1 minute here, and they were gone. Where did they go? My yesterdays. Seems only moments ago I was a child at play. I didn't know they'd fly away. Where did they go, my yesterdays? What happened to those carefree times? I never saw them rushing past. If I had known how fast they would disappear, I would have tried to make each moment last. Where did they go, my yesterdays? Seems only moments ago I was a child at play. I didn't know they'd fly away. Where did they go, my yesterdays? I didn't know they'd fly away. Where did they go, my yesterdays? The quiet evening was suddenly distracted by some noises from upstairs. Groan, rumble, screak. Henry knew where the sound was coming from. It was his story box. He sat listening till the stars sparkled in the night sky. Then he slowly stood, and with short, careful steps, he climbed the stairs to his room. He changed into his favorite pajamas and got into bed. He worried as he gazed at the box down near his feet. It had recently begun making a groaning, rumbling, squeaking noise. Groan, rumble, screak. The noise kept him up some nights. Even putting a pillow over his head didn't seem to help. Groan, rumble, screak. Henry knew what the problem was. He knew why the box groaned, rumbled, and squeaked. The box was too full, bulging with stories. In fact, after putting in the last memory, he had to sit on the lid just to get it to close. So once again, he lay there listening to the box squeak and groan, and suddenly he sat up in bed. Oh no, he thought. All of his stories were safely locked in the box, except one. The story of his story box. How he had made it as a boy, kept it at the foot of his bed, filling it with the colorful stories of his life to keep them safe. How it now kept him awake at night, with its squeaking and groaning because it was bulging with the stories. He had to get the story of his story box locked safely in the story box. Oh, Henry climbed out of bed, quickly as an old man can, and knelt in front of the box. He listened as it groaned. Oh, you must have room for just one more story, he told the box softly. Henry reached up to his head and plucked out the story of the story box. It swirled a deep purple and yellow. Oh, the perfect color, he thought. With the other hand, he grabbed the key from around his neck. He unlocked the lock. Click. Here goes, Henry said out loud. With a trembling hand, he lifted the lid just a bit. Creak! He shoved in the memory and tried to close the lid. It wouldn't close. He tried pushing down on the lid with all of his strength. It wouldn't budge. In fact, the box started to rumble louder. It began to groan and shake. Henry sat on the box and it began to bounce. He lay across the box and threw his arms around it as it began shaking and bouncing worse than ever. It rattled his teeth and his old bones as it groaned, squeaked, bounced and rattled. It started to bounce across the bedroom floor with Henry holding on tight. Whoa! I'm not sure how I got here. I don't know what to do. But I'm stuck up here on this old ride. This time I know I'm through. I can't see where I'm going. I know it can't be good. If there was a way I could escape, well, I swear to you I would. I spin to the left, spinning to the right, jerking me here and there, my oh my. Shaking in the front, shaking in the back, a twirling and a whirling, and that's a fact. A bumping and a thumping and a slip and slide. Somebody tell me, how do I stop this ride? Whoa! 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 Now it's getting faster, throwing me around, knocking, tossing, rocking, bouncing up and down. I'm headed for disaster. This must be the end. Just when I thought it was slowing down, here we go again. Whoa! Spinning to the left, spinning to the right, jerking me here and there, my oh my. Shaking in the front, shaking in the back, twirling and whirling, and that's a fact. Bumping and thumping, slip and slide. Somebody tell me, how do I stop this ride? Bumping and thumping and a slip and slide. Somebody tell me, how do I stop this ride? Whoa! The groaning, rumbly, squeaky sounds were at a high pitch now as the box continued spinning, pounding up and down on the floor. Henry, fearing for his very life, jumped off the box and dove under the bed just in time. Boom! The lid of the box flew open as the story shot out the top. Like fireworks, the stories burst into thousands of color pieces, flying out the window into the night sky. Henry lay under his bed as his room got quiet. He slowly peeked out and saw his box, sitting still in the middle of the room. The lid was hanging off the side, barely attached by a bent hinge. He crawled over to the box, looked inside. The box was empty. The stories were gone. Henry began to cry. The next morning, there was a knock at the front door. Knock, knock, knock. He slowly lumbered over to the door and opened it. A man stood on his porch, smiling. He had a large gray mustache, wore blue suspenders, and a black hat. The man asked, "Excuse me, sir, are you Henry?" "Yes," Henry managed to reply. "Well," the old man continued, "I found a piece of story in my front yard this morning about the time you had to spend a night in a cave, and when you woke, You found you were sleeping next to a bear. Oh, this is well, I was wondering how the story ended as I only got part of the story, you see. So, Henry told the man the rest of the story. When Henry was done, the man chuckled and said, "Well, if that don't beat all, my family is going to love that story." The man thanked Henry, tipped his hat, and walked down the street. A few minutes later, there was another knock at the door. Knock, knock, knock. It was two children who'd also found part of a story. They were curious if the raft Henry built as a boy had actually floated on the river. Henry smiled, sat on an old chair on the front porch, and told the captivated kids about the raft. With wide eyes, they ran off to tell their friends. As the day wore on, more and more people showed up at Henry's house asking about the stories. It occurred to Henry that bits of his stories must have fallen over the entire town. By early evening, a large crowd of people filled his yard and the street in front of his house. A perplexed Henry stood on his porch, looking out at all those people. And then he had a splendid, wonderful idea, the kind of idea that tickles your stomach and spins your mind back and forth, around and around. "I'll be right back," he told everyone excitedly. "Oh, don't go away." The crowd waited as he ran to his backyard into his old shed. Saw, saw, saw. Brush, brush, brush. He returned to the front porch with a hammer and an old board. The large crowd watched as he hammered a nail into a post next to the steps. Bam, bam, bam. Then, using the string from around his neck, he hung the old board on the nail. In wet paint were the words, "Henry's Stories." He pulled his old chair to the front of the porch. He told everybody to have a seat. When all the people were settled, he smiled, looked around, and began. "This is a story about a boy who loved stories. His name was Henry. I thought if I told you about me, you might better know yourself. So, if you have a moment to listen, I have a story to tell. No one's called me a hero. I've never had fortune or fame. But I've tried to look at the good side of life, no matter what came my way. This is my story. I want you to see the boy that I was and the man that is me. And if I could do it, I'd live it again. The life that I love with my family and friends. This is my story. I want you to hear lessons I've learned that now I see clear. I want you to listen and hope you will find the joy in the stories I leave behind. My journey is made up of stories that are gone in the blink of an eye. But if I take a moment to share them, it may help keep the stories alive. Then I hope you'll go tell another and retell them over the years. And together we'll share this adventure called life. Relive the laughter and tears. This is my story. I want you to see the boy that I was and the man that is me. And if I could do it, I'd live it again. The life that I love with my family and friends. This is my story. I want you to hear lessons I've learned that now I see clear. I want you to listen and hope you will find the joy in the stories I leave behind. That evening, as the sun set in shimmering waves of purple and blue, the air was filled with the sounds of Henry's voice. The delighted crowd smiled, gasped, and laughed at the colors of his stories. Over the next few weeks, Henry's stories were retold by others. Around the dinner table, on long drives or walks. They were shared on a park bench, over ice cream, even in line at the market. And then a magical thing happened. People began telling their own stories. They would share with family and friends, sometimes even a stranger on a bus. And as they shared, they noticed the world was always a bit brighter and more colorful. And these found a sense of peace, knowing their own stories would never be lost. This is my story, I want you to hear. Lessons I've learned that now I see clear. I want you to listen, and I hope you will find the joy in the stories we leave behind. Thanks for listening.